No matter what city you're living in, there's probably a place on the weekends, and this can happen throughout the week, where people are going to be selling stuff just straight up on the street. And what I mean is they're going to have a tarp that they're going to put down, and then they're going to put stuff on top of the tarp, and you can go ahead and buy it. And a lot of times, it's the most random stuff you may have ever seen. When I was living in Bushwick, Brooklyn, this would happen at Maria Hernandez Park, around the edge of the park on Saturdays, and specifically on Sundays, where people would just come up and try to sell stuff. This also happened in Buenos Aires when I was living there in Argentina, where people would do this. And more recently, I was in downtown Bogotá, and I had some friends visiting from the States, and we were just walking through, and I love this stuff. I am a fiend for buying weird stuff off the street from people and, finding value in things that maybe other people just don't find value in. The whole idea of one man's trash is another man's treasure really comes to light in these type of marketplaces. And this past Friday, I was downtown Bogotá, and I ran into this woman. Her name's Sani, and she's probably early 60s, more or less mid 60s, early 60s. And what she was selling was currencies. She had albums of bills from around the world, and then she had these trays of coins from around the world, and she also had albums of coins. And to give you an idea of the rarity of the coins she had a 1924 Mercury dime. Now, if you don't know what that is, go ahead and Google, but I will tell you it's a very rare thing. She also had a 1935 Adolf Hitler coin, which was part of the Third Reich monetary system. She also had a 1962 Soviet-era coin. And I actually went ahead and bought that. And I bought it for about $5. I don't even know if it's worth that much, but for me, the novelty was worth that much. And one of the things that she said was that currencies tell the history of the world. So in this episode, let's dive into that idea and also lay in how I think Bitcoin plays a part in the future history of currencies. I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is More Than Blockchain. Okay, so I'm going to take you to downtown Bogotá. We've run into Sunny, and she has this little table out with all these currencies. Like I said, she has these magazines or these kind of things where maybe you'd put baseball cards, but they're for bills. And she had bills from all over the world, from Cuba to India to many parts of Europe to Asia to all over Latin America. And one of the most fascinating things about much of the currency she had is that they were worthless, right? They were worthless in the sense that they could no longer buy you anything because they've lost basically their ability to be exchanged. Now their only value is just essentially being a novelty, right? Where you're going to buy a coin, as I did, as I said in the intro, where I bought a Soviet era coin because I was like, that's crazy. It's from 1962. It says CCCP on it, which was the Communist Party of the Soviet era. And I also shouted out in the beginning, in the intro, that there was also a Hitler coin. Now, I didn't want to buy the Hitler coin because I don't know, there's some ethical things there, right? Should we be buying Nazi memorabilia? And so I didn't buy that, but that was from 1935. And at that time, the Third Reich was economically powerful. And I'm sure they could have never thought that in the future, the Third Reich would fall, right? That Hitler wouldn't take over the world. And now that coin, other than a novelty, is not worth anything. And then finally, there was a 1924 Mercury dime among all of the coins that she had on display. These were the three that really kind of caught my eye. Now, my grandfather, who passed away in 2008, he is a World War II veteran, was a World War II veteran. And throughout his life, he collected coins. And he actually, when he passed, he left us the coins. So I've always been very fascinated by currencies. And then as someone who, and this is maybe a little TMI if you don't know this about me, but I was adopted from Latin America and then raised in the United States. And so as a little kid, my parents, I remember them showing me coins from Latin America, from Mexico, from Peru, from Colombia. So I was always hyper aware, even as a younger person in the United States, that other currencies existed. And for most kids who I grew up with who were just born and raised in the United States, the idea of different currencies really didn't come into play. So for me, I've had a long history of understanding that there were different currencies out there and kind of being fascinated by it. And let's go back to Bogotá. And I'm there with two of my friends who are visiting, Arena and Maddie. I'm shouting you guys out on the podcast. we stopped and we started to talk to this woman, Sony, who was selling the currencies. And one of the things that she said that really stuck with me and with Maddie and Rena was this idea that currencies tell our history. They tell our world history. They tell our story. And while it may seem like something so simple and so obvious, I think it's very profound because when you look back throughout history, one of the ways that we try to figure out how empires rose and fell was literally looking at the percent of precious metals that made up a specific currency and then how those precious metals started to dwindle over time. This happened in the Roman Empire, where the Roman Empire would pay their soldiers. Originally, they started to pay them with a gold coin for their service. And that was really powerful because the gold coin then they could take and then they could go essentially leverage that to buy their shelter, to buy their food, to support their family. But over the history of the Roman Empire, they started to dumb down the amount of gold that they put in, and they started to put in less, I want to say precious, but less important or less expensive metals like copper or nickel instead of the gold. And all they're doing there is a very, very obvious and direct devaluing of the currency. So now let's go all the way up to modern day United States. And for a Bitcoin maxi, or for anyone who is a Bitcoin maximalist, or anyone who really sees Bitcoin as the future of currencies, part of their thesis, which is based in historical events, is that when the currencies around the world, the fiat currencies, the currencies that are being printed by central banks, when those cease to basically hold value, then we're going to need something else. And what is the most logical next thing in the world we live in, which is digital and virtual? Most of my friends, if not all of my millennial peers, work on the internet. Now, some people work fully remote, as I do. Other people work hybrid, so they go into the office a little bit. But even my friends that go into the office, they're still sitting on their computer. Without the internet and without our connectivity and without our technology, the world doesn't move forward. So when I think logically about what is going to be the next step of currency, I think it's going to be a cryptocurrency, and I think Bitcoin leads the way. Bitcoin is something that is decentralized, and so it's one of these things that's not owned by everyone. It's not owned, by anyone, but it's controlled by everyone. And that idea is just so drastically different from the way historically we've thought about a currency or we've thought about money. Because historically, money has to come essentially from government, has to be passed down to us and told that it is valuable. This is what happens with the US dollar. But as we've seen, and if you're a Gen Z or a millennial especially, you know that you can't put money underneath your mattress and that's going to be the way that you're going to retire. That's just not, or even allow you to build wealth, right? If I take $100 today in 2023 and I put it underneath my mattress and I pull it out in 2033, it's probably going to buy me a third, a fourth, maybe even a fifth of what it could buy me today. Meaning, if it buys me a fifth of what it could buy me today, it will have lost 80% of its value. So, going back to Bogota, talking to Sunny, looking at all these coins, thinking about how all of these empires at one point, or all of these governments at one point, thought that this was the right thing to do, to print money, tying now in Bitcoin, going forward, right, which is a new currency. Bitcoin seems to me the one that is the most likely to probably succeed in being the next iteration, the next logical iteration of currency in our digital and virtual world, where we're like, we can't centralize money printing. So let's decentralize it. And Bitcoin does that. The Bitcoin mining network, the network that basically backs Bitcoin, which allows it to secure the network in a decentralized manner, is something that the world has really never had before. So I wanted to share this story with you of meeting Sani and looking at all these currencies. And one of the currencies actually that really stood out, she had a lot of Venezuelan bolivars, which are now worthless. So anyway, I wanted to shout out this and kind of tie it into the future and just say that if we jump in a time machine and we go 30 years ahead, I think we'll be able to look back and it will seem very obvious how Bitcoin fit in. It is an internet native money that is owned by no one, but controlled by everyone equally, that allows people on the internet to exchange value across borders. And I guess that's the last thing I want to say. One of the things that Sonny said, because we were talking about the Russia and Ukraine situation, we were talking about how wars really shape monetary policy, and which is a crazy thing to basically be talking about in the street in the middle of a big city with someone who you don't know. But that's where the conversation went. And one of the final things she said is that we should live in a world without borders. And I think for me, Bitcoin is that world. It's a borderless world where everyone can exchange value and you don't need to have permissions. It is a permissionless system. You don't need to have a bank account. You don't need to have an ID to prove that you are a citizen to get a bank account. You don't need to have a job to prove that you can then get a bank account. It is permissionless, it is decentralized, and it is a borderless monetary world. Thanks for checking out this episode of More Than Blockchain. And if you want to see pictures of what these coins look like and or what Sony's setup looks like, I'm going to go ahead and leave some links in the episode show notes that are to videos that I've taken about Sony's setup that kind of talk about money, currencies, Bitcoin. So go ahead and check those out. I'm also going to leave a tweet that also shares specifically what the Hitler and the Soviet era coins look like if you're interested to see what those look like. As always, go ahead and follow us on social media at More Than Blockchain. And if you don't do so already, be sure to follow our YouTube. The link is in the episode show notes. I'm putting up exclusive content there every week. If you enjoyed this episode on currencies, please go ahead and share it with a friend, family member, or colleague. I think the more people understand currency, the more likely they are to probably start to see the benefits of maybe what Bitcoin can offer the world. No matter where you're listening to the pod, please go ahead and subscribe. Thanks again for checking out this episode of More Than Blockchain, and I'll see you next time.